Good. That's good. And our guest today, Richard Case, welcome to the table.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So good to have you. And of course, he's written a book, Life in Forgiveness. Well, to the outside world, Richard's childhood might have seemed normal or even above average. He was the son of a surgeon, and his mother was very much a socialite. But beneath the surface, his world was one of abuse and manipulation at the hands of his over-controlling mother. Richard, take us back. Tell us a little bit about growing up. Your mother had a very dominant personality and a very abusive tongue.
Yes, yeah. She was very dogmatic. It was her way or no other way, and whatever she said went. And if you ever fought against it, you were going to get punished. Because of my personality, I was a pretty good fighter, but I lost all the time.
Wow.
So she would abuse us with anger and hardness and punishment. So
Were you the oldest, Richard?
I was the middle.
You were the middle. How did you adapt to that? Did you ever talk to your dad about it? I mean, because he wasn't verbally abusive.
No, he was active with his surgery, obviously, in the hospital. So then he was a golfer. So he kind of just was laissez-faire, figure it out yourself, and I'm not going to intervene, and I'm not going to help you. And so it wasn't somebody I could really go to and talk about. I had to really just live with it.
So he was probably gone a lot, too.
He was gone a lot, yeah.
And so it was just your mom kind of running things.
So
in retrospect, I imagine because of the way she was, that was probably one of the reasons why he was gone a lot.
One of the reasons. It was easier for him, more pleasant for him to be gone than to be home.
Wow, because it wasn't just because she had children at home and dealing with that, because as I understand, as you grew up and you got married and had children, she continued that type of verbal abuse to your wife.
Yeah, that was her nature. Was it's my way, and I don't care. And it was oftentimes extremely irrational. But it was things like if I had my elbows on the table, I'd get them smacked and I'd be yelled at. It wouldn't be like take them off the table. I'd be yelled at. I mean, so we had to really be careful, and that carried over with my wife, which she was pretty hard on her because, she's married to me now. And then when I had children, she treated my kids the same way that she, treated me. And of course, they didn't understand it. How was Grandma treated? Why was Grandma treating them this way?
Where do you think that came from? Do you think it's just because she was given everything in her life? She was used to getting her way?
No, this is the generational sense. Her dad was a Scottish Presbyterian, dogmatic, his way or the highway, and she grew up under that scenario, and that anger resonated with her. She was very bitter toward her dad, and that's how she treated the rest of the world. Really, it wasn't just the family; it was the way everything went for her.
How did you protect yourself from not flowing into that same generational thing that was being passed down? I
was blessed. They were religious, but they didn't go to church, but they sent me to church. So I go to church, and I went to Sunday school and learned some things. But I was an athlete. So I'm a really good baseball player, football player, basketball player. And so I wound up having coaches that kind of served as my parents. And they taught me, encouragement and live with it. And I put all my life back into being athletic, and so I would go play ball and just leave the house, and as long as I was there on time and did what she wanted, I had to do what she wanted, and then I could have freedom behind it because I could go play. And interesting enough, they didn't actually even know where I was playing as long as I was home on time, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's amazing. Wow. It's so interesting that she probably the very thing that she hated, she repeated, but you chose not to. Yeah. And so, so many people go through life and the things that they hate, they repeat, but you can put a stop to it if you just determine in your heart with
and for
God's
me,
help.
my wife and I accepted Christ together when we first year after we were married, and He changed our hearts. So I think I probably would have perpetuated that, that generational curse, and wound up in the same place because I had that anger and bitterness too, and I was strong. But Christ changed our lives. We began to realize, what, we don't need to live that way.
And I'm so glad you said that, because for people watching today, and that's a good word for you to hear and understand, that you don't have to continue that cycle. It can be broken.
Yep.
the blood of Jesus
Yes.
breaks all of that and changes all that. I'm so glad you said that. That happened with my grandfather, and the generational curses that came, from his father, who committed suicide, and the depression and the alcoholism and everything else that was being passed down when my grandfather surrendered his life to the Lord. All that was broken then for my dad and his 6 sisters, and now, our family, and now for you kids, on and on. I think that's such an important thing to mention. So here you are, you're married, you go on to get your MBA from the University of South Carolina. Life is good, you have kids, but you want to, stay connected with family.
Yeah.
And Rachel knows our family just got back from vacation. We love being together.
We do.
Family is really, really important. So I'm sure you had that desire to still stay connected to your family and have relationship. You start doing holidays, but what happens?
Yeah, it was natural to go back home for holidays, Christmas and birthdays and celebrations. And then every time we'd go back, my mom, again, would use her dogmatic abusiveness to attack everybody. And there'd always be a big blow up.
What would be some of the things she would say or do that were just so hard to deal with?
Like at a Christmas holiday.
She would start yelling, particularly at one of the kids, like my sister. She would say something about her cooking, and then they'd get in a fight, and the fight would just get bigger and bigger and bigger until finally somebody's going to leave, and it's a terrible mess. And here we are trying to celebrate Christmas, and my kids are getting attacked by, my mom would tell them, stop doing that and don't do this, and just all these very dogmatic rules. So there was no joy there.
The tone in it, I'm sure, was a lot of anger.
A lot of anger, and my kids were shocked.
And what about your wife? What was her problem with your wife?
She was just my wife. She took away her boy, and because she would be jealous. Linda was naturally joyful, and as the evening went on, that natural joy of laughter actually irritated my mom. And and we could, and I even talked about it with the siblings, is that, hey, by 8 o'clock at night, you're going to see a change, and my mom's going to start going after people because she can't handle us being joyful.
That's a miserable way to live.
It's miserable.
I mean, that's what I'm thinking. That really was a miserable way to live, wasn't it?
It was miserable. Never herself ever having freedom.
So finally, a breaking point took place where you and your family just decided, we can't do this anymore.
Right.
What happened?
We had visited my mom and all of us, and we walked in the door, and she started screaming at everybody.
Oh, goodness.
And that was it. I said, okay, that's it.
Oh, goodness.
We're out. I didn't even continue that visit. I said, we're getting in the car and we're going. That's the end of this. I am not going to put up with this anymore. We don't need to put up with this. And it's nuts, crazy.
Yeah.
So we just said, that's enough, and we got in the car and went home.
And how long did that period of time, how long was it that you were separated from
It was about
your mom?
6 months where we didn't really talk to each other, and she knew, that I had said that's enough. And
Did your mom get better or worse in that 6 months?
She really just put up with the separate. She just said, "Fine, you want to live that way? Go ahead."
Wow.
So there wasn't any attempt on her part to say, "Gee, I'm kind of sorry what I did." It was like tough, put
Right.
up with
And
it.
that's something, don't you think, April, people wait for when there's problems, or when, say they've been wronged, and they'll sit there. I mean, I've thought it before. I know probably you've thought it before. Well, they need to apologize. I'm going to stay right here at this place until, and you think about it, and they're not thinking anything about apologizing.
And meanwhile, it's eating us up, and we can wait
Exactly.
till the cows come home. But we gotta forgive anyway.
Yeah.
And I know that's what you did.
Yeah, that's the. I'd say that's one of the big reasons why people don't forgive is I'm waiting for them to apologize. They're the ones that did the hurt.
Right.
Yes.
I just walked in the door.
Yeah.
And it's like, I didn't do anything, you did it. So when you decide you're going to ask for apology, or you apologize to me, then I'll come back and be with you. And now I'm withholding, my love with her, but it's eating us up in the meantime. And the interesting thing is, it didn't, like Marcus said earlier today, he said, doesn't really bother them at all. It doesn't bother them a bit.
So, you were in a service, and there was a message on forgiveness, and you and your wife were sitting there, and the Holy Spirit begin to deal with you. And I bet you're thinking, why are you talking to me about this? Go talk to my mother about it.
That's right.
But the Lord, and that's not the way he works. And he doesn't say forgive if they apologize or forgive if this changes or forgive. He just says,
forget.
Yeah. So what happened in that service for both of you?
You know, it's funny when the Spirit speaks, the pastor obviously was just speaking generically, and the Spirit said, you know, this is you. But when my mom, you know, and he's trying to say, look, this. I want to deal with your heart. And basically, the question in the service was even, you know, what's it like to be living in bondage? And it's it's not pleasant. So I can free you, and this is between you and me. It's not between you and your mom. And that's when I began to recognize the truth of that forgiveness was something that I could have for her on the same basis that I've been forgiven, because God says, I've forgiven you even though you don't deserve it. You can forgive your mom even though she doesn't deserve it. And you can have freedom just in that alone, even if you never get reconciled to her. And he's began to show me the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation.
And forgiveness doesn't make what they did right. It makes you free. And that's
right.
what the Lord wants for us. And that's why forgiveness is so important. It isn't about them. It's about us.
Right.
Exactly.
Not carrying that.
That's right. And this is particularly significant because really we can be unreconciled with anybody else. There's really only two relationships that we're called to be reconciled to, or at least to some level. One is our spouses. You got to go to oneness, and that a couple is always urged to keep working toward reconciliation. And with your mom and dad, it's one promise in Scripture that says you got to honor your mom and dad, and if you do, you'll be blessed, and if you don't, you're not going to be blessed. And so the issue for me at that point is, oh, okay, I can forgive her, but how do I then honor her? And because I can't allow her to keep hurting me. So that was an interesting process.
And so what did the Lord show you on that? Because you actually reached out to her in love and forgiveness, but that didn't necessarily mean total reconciliation where you go for every holiday.
Exactly.
And what did the Lord share with you on that?
Yeah, with reconciliation then is a willingness to go to truth, but I have to maintain my truth. So once I forgave her, and that took a while for God to work in my heart to where I could now be in the same room with her, and I wouldn't have that rising up. Hey, Mom, do you want to talk about what happened? No. Okay. Well, how about if we just, spend some time together? Yeah, that'd be fine. And then my wife and I and my kids decided, okay, how are we going to do that? Because I'm not going to do any more holidays with that. Because I'm not going to put up with that. Because she hadn't changed.
Right.
So what I did is set up boundaries. And my wife and I decided, well, we can go be a weekend prior to Christmas with them. And we can put up with anything for 2 days. And then we get to leave, but we're not going to ruin our Christmas anymore. So we stopped doing holidays completely.
Right. But you're still honoring her and forgiving her.
Well, I had forgiven her.
Walking in forgiveness.
I could call her on the phone.
Yeah.
I could visit her even prior to Christmas, Thanksgiving, all those things. So we would go visit her, but we would have very short periods of time, knowing that she'd still be abusive, but it can kind of just roll off your back because, you know what, and I kept telling my wife this, tomorrow night at 10, we're going to walk out of this place, and that we get to go home. And we can put up with anything for a few days.
What was the process like for your wife? Was it hard for her, or was she just kind of where you were at and kind of followed your lead, or how?
She had also developed a bitterness because it was irrational, and her anger was actually more toward because of what was happening with the kids, and it's impacting the hearts of those kids. When we both learned forgiveness, she learned it along with me, so yeah, I could forgive her. And then her question was, well, how do we set up a healthy boundary? Because we can't keep going back to that. So how do we set up a healthy boundary? And she and I worked that through. What was acceptable to you for us to spend time with my mom without it impacting the kids? And so we didn't take the kids that often. Once in a while. But we didn't necessarily take them all the time. We would go and spend a few days for Christmas, but it would just be my wife and I because we could handle it, whereas our kids could not. So we worked together what that looked like. And it became different over the years, but she was a big part of what's healthy for us, and she helped set that boundary.
And your kids got to see you walk that out.
Yes.
That you protected them, set the boundaries, but you also continue to love your mom and
Right.
honor her.
That's right.
Right.
And, you know, to reach out to her.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that impacted them, didn't
Big time.
it, as
And, you know,
adults?
now that they're married, you know, they've understood about honoring mom and dad, you know,
Yeah.
so their in-laws and things that, you know, there's always interesting things
And
going
it's
on.
okay to set boundaries.
It's okay to set boundaries, and it's healthy, but it's a command by God to work through that issue of living in forgiveness. How do I honor my mom and dad when they're still abusing me and hurting me? And there's ways to do it, and God gives you these neat insights about how to do it.
I think that's cool too that you and your wife worked as a team to figure that out.
Yes.
I think that's really important because it wasn't just you that was me and her, it was her too. So
Right.
hearing her voice and being empathetic to what she went through is really awesome.
I think
and
that
we-
is important.
And we would prepare when we take the kids, you know, and we would prepare them, you know, that, you know, we'd pray it up and we would talk about it and say, you know, when grandma does this, you know, relax, it'll be fine. We get to leave tomorrow afternoon. Just do nothing. Don't react to it.
We're going to love her.
Don't let your heart be wounded by this.
Yeah.
And when we leave, we'll be freedom and we're going to go have some fun. And they learned that the boundary was okay, and they could put up with the stress of it for a short period of time.
That's good. That's good. Well, you don't want to go anywhere. When we come back, Richard shares some principles on forgiveness that will change your life. Stay with us. Well, after decades of dealing with abuse from a manipulative, controlling mother, Richard Case finally found peace and freedom from the frustration. And it began with one simple word: forgiveness. And of course, your book, Life in Forgiveness, is a result of your own life struggle with your mother that you loved. But, you know, interestingly enough, and this is, I think, important for you to hear today, that, you know, when you walk in forgiveness, it doesn't necessarily mean reconciliation. I can think of people that have been strategic in my life for a season. And, you know, I'm the kind of person that I keep my friends 30 plus, you know, years, forever, like you're my friend forever. But there are people that come in your life and through betrayal and other things that you have to walk out forgiveness, and that relationship will end. And I think a lot of times people think, well, if I forgive, that means we've got to come back together. But there are times when reconciliation doesn't take place, but we still have to forgive. Talk a little bit about that. Forgiveness does not equal reconciliation. It can, but that's really another process.
Right. It's kind of really simple. Forgiveness is between me and God. And I can forgive on the same basis that Christ forgave me, which is his nature. If he did it based on what we deserve, and it says even in Psalm 130, if I did what you deserve, there'd be no shot. But I forgave you on my nature. So we can offer forgiveness toward everybody else, live in the freedom, no bitterness, no anger. I can be in the same room with somebody. And then the second piece of it is, are we willing to go process truth in a reconciling way? So that, you know, has Christ forgiven everybody? Yes. Is he reconciled to everybody? No. Why? Well, because he can't alter the truth. So he doesn't say, well, just because I have empathy for you, I'm going to let you spend eternity with me, even though you don't believe me. He says, if you don't believe me, I can't allow you to be reconciled with me. So it takes two parties. So when you have forgiveness, you have the freedom to sit down with somebody and say, would you like to talk about it? Because I'll talk about it all day long. If it's something that I've done, I'll be happy to talk about it. But if I'd like to share what you've done to me. Most people don't want to do that.
That's true. They don't like confrontation.
They don't want to talk about it. No, I'm not going to talk to you. Or no, I don't want to deal with the issue.
Or they don't want to admit they had any part in it.
Or they have any part in it. So, okay, that's okay with me. I can live without being reconciled to you. And like you said, then what happens is that's going to not have them be intimate with me anymore. So I'm not going to spend any more time with them.
Nor do you want to.
Nor do I want to. And again, I think I said this before, that with your spouse, you got to work at it.
Right.
With your mom and dad.
You have to be reconciled with your spouse, with your husband or your wife. If you're going to say married, you have to be reconciled.
That's right.
But those outside relationships, you know.
Right. And they can literally go away because they don't want to process things anymore. And it doesn't irritate you anymore because you're free in forgiveness. You've offered to go to reconciliation. They don't want to.
Yeah.
And you may never spend any time with them at all. They could call you, somebody could mention their name, you could wind up in the same room with them. It doesn't bring any anger, upsetness to you, which, by the way, is the great indicator of forgiveness.
You have a story of forgiveness.
Of kind of that. You know, I had forgiven, so I thought, and then every time that person's name was mentioned, I could remember the scenario. I could remember what they were wearing, and that it wasn't cute. No, I'm just kidding.
Of course
And one time I was in the car with my big
They
sister,
weren't
Lisa.
cute. The outfit wasn't
It was
cute.
all just-
Nothing was cute about
wasn't
it.
good. I was in the car with Lisa, my big sister, and something was mentioned, and I mean, what came out of my mouth just wasn't good, and I'm normally a nice person. And, and you know, and even after I said it, I thought, where did that come from? And the next morning, Lisa, being like my dad, called me over and said, April, I think that you haven't gotten rid of that. And I knew it wasn't right. And so anyway, she said, the anointing of God is not going to increase on your life as long as you harbor that.
That's
and I
right.
thought, you know what? I don't want to mess with God. And I let it go. And I really did let it go. Now, that person's cute.
Right.
Yeah.
What they wear is cute. I'm good with it.
I think I said when we were talking during the break that for me, you know, first off, you can't do this in and of yourself, okay? It's only the Spirit of God in you that enables you to walk out the kind of forgiveness we're talking about. You can try all day long to do it on your own. I'm sorry, you don't have enough of righteousness in you to do that. The Bible says our righteousness is like filthy rags. But one of the things that I know is when I start to visualize different situations and people in my life that there have been hurt, struggles, etc. But when I actually visualize God doing good for them in their life, and I'm happy about it, that's when I know I'm in a good place.
Right.
Yeah. So you love this show today.
Yes.
And you've had to walk through forgiveness. Tell us your story.
I have in many different ways, and the one I want to share today is I've had to work on forgiving myself. There was a period of time some years ago when who is my ex-husband now, went to prison. And in that process, a little bit of time, then ultimately a divorce. And so as a mother, a lot of emotions went on, so many emotions, because the world I knew totally was never again. And so I made decisions about location and my children and their school. And I can remember the boys, like, they hated the new school, and there were so many things they went through. And so moving, and because I needed to work, where the door opened for work, you know, I went. Well, they didn't want to come. And so many things I went through. And it was like I beat myself up that I had made. You know, when I look back, oh, did I make that right decision? Did I do right? Or if something didn't go well in their life, is that my fault because of the decisions I made that I thought were best at the time?
Because now if you could go back, you would have changed some things. Because hindsight's 20/20,
exactly.
right?
There are things I would do different. So I have had to work on forgiving myself. I have to say, recently my youngest son was at the house, and he was about to go to bed, and he said, Mom, I just want to tell you, you were the best mom and are the best mom to John David and I, and we love you.
Beautiful.
And I needed that because the enemy really messes with the soul.
So you need to forgive
You have
yourself.
to forgive yourself.
That is important. Don't you think there are a lot of people that don't forgive themselves?
I do, and you know, I think that it's important to forgive yourself, because if you don't, it's like you're saying God's sacrifice on the cross wasn't good enough.
There you go. That is a powerful statement for sure. When you don't forgive yourself, it's like saying, Jesus, what you did on the cross isn't good enough.
Yeah.
And really, you're exalting yourself above the work of the cross. And when you think about it in those terms, you're like, yes, I must forgive myself. I must forgive those around me. I have to forgive. I have to walk in love. And that's why you need to get Richard's book, Life in Forgiveness, because we barely scratched the surface, and we are out of time. And these shows go by so fast. I want to thank Richard for joining us around the table. Again, remember to pick up a copy of his book, Life in Forgiveness. I don't think you can read too many books on forgiveness. I think it's so important. And for more from Richard, you can visit him online at allforjesuslivingwaters.com. Again, if you're battling with forgiving someone, if you'd like prayer, if there's a situation going on in your life, you just want to talk to someone about it privately, you can call the number that's on the screen. Our prayer partners are standing by, ready to pray for you. Also, we'd love to hear your thoughts about the program. You can leave us a comment on Facebook. I'd love to hear your forgiveness stories. I mean, what are some of the things that you've gone through where you had to forgive and God brought you to the other side? I'd love to hear your stories. Also, we'd love to hear from you on Twitter. You can tweet me at Daystar Joni, and we'd love to hear from you. Again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
And we'll
Appreciate it.
see you next time. Bye-bye for today.